Hello everyone and welcome to this week's webinar. I'm Dave Jones and this week we'll be talking about rates, dynamic pricing and bar multi. You can help us out by hitting the subscribe button, leaving a comment and perhaps liking the video. Thank you. So let's get into it right now. I don't know how to turn the page. Here we go. So these are some of the things that we'll be talking about today in the various slides, and we'll also be doing some live demonstrations as well. Now, why am I talking about, and look, just some of the definitions we'll use, and I'll try and go through this as we're going through the presentation. One that probably stands out, I'll talk about categories. You'll hear me say categories 100 times. I'm talking about room types, depending on what sort of business you operate, apartments, hotels, motels, whatever, holiday parks, whatever it happen to be. I'm talking about your units of accommodation when I use the term category. But any others I'll explain as we go along. Bar multi, why don't I just talk about the traditional way of doing rates? Well, RMS has developed a rate management tool over many years, 30 plus years, and over that time it's evolved and become more refined. It's very flexible, very robust. I've never dealt with a property yet where we haven't been able to manage their rates with the various options within the RMS rate calculation engine. But if it did have one slight disadvantage, it is a little bit difficult to change rates. There's two massive advantages in using multi-bar, or bar multi, whatever you like to call it. I call it bar multi. There's a couple of massive advantages. One is it's very easy to set up, and in fact, it is the only system I use now. If I'm helping somebody set up rates, the only one I use is bar multi. Very easy to set up. Far few rate tables, which is sort of the thing that gets people down a little bit. And the other thing is it does have its own yield management component. And as part of that, it's extremely easy to change the entire rate plan for a property or a group of properties for that matter in just a couple of mouse clicks. So I'll be keen to show you how we can do all of that. Talking about yield management, there's several ways you can manage your yield. One of them is with the inbuilt dynamic pricing. Dynamic pricing is great, and we're actually going to talk about that and how we can automate the changing, the increasing or decreasing of rates to suit your supply and demand. The only issue with dynamic pricing left on its own is that if something changes suddenly, and the example I've always used in the past is when we're talking about, maybe you get a really good 5-day weather forecast and the phone starts ringing and you want to quickly change the rate, for example. Dynamic pricing will do that, but of course, and I'll go into more detail and show you the inner workings of dynamic pricing shortly. But the problem is, of course, that it's ratcheting up the price as you hit individual occupancy brackets. Whereas using bar multi, we can change a rate instantly to reflect a change. And the example that I use now is that earlier in the year when Queen Elizabeth sadly died, we suddenly got a free public holiday, a public holiday out of nowhere. And that actually, in most cases, added on to a weekend. So out of nowhere, we got a long weekend. What might have been, a bit of a dud Friday or Thursday, whatever day it fell in your area, suddenly became, a period of high demand. And we needed to be able to change that rate very, very quickly, not wait for dynamic pricing to do its magic. The other alternative is a lot of the properties that are watching here today are probably using a revenue manager such as, Ideas or whatever. RMS interface seamlessly with a number of high-end revenue managers, and I don't think for one moment I'm trying to talk you out of that. If you've got a business that's turning over multiple millions of dollars a year and you've got hundreds of rooms and you're trying to optimize that, you must use something like that, an Ideas type product. So I'm not trying to talk you out of that, but for many of the folks in the middle, you've got to admit it is a little bit expensive and for some a little bit complicated. Whereas what I'm going to show you today is something that's inbuilt into RMS. You're already paying for it. And I'm going to show you a way that you can use that where, if you're not in the realm of needing a fully blown revenue management system, maybe this will be the answer for you. If you're going to use multi-bar, now, if you're playing along with me at home, you might want to turn this on now, or you might want to wait to evaluate what you've seen today, whether you want to turn it or not. But the only one thing that you do need to do to turn bar multi on is you need to go into the side menu into setup, then go to accounting options, rate and rent options, and you'll see an option there to use multi-bar, little checkbox down in the bottom left-hand corner. That is the one thing you will need to do. You'll be receiving a handout on your email after this show, so you will be able to refer to that later if you haven't got time to write that down. All right, so I'm just going to go into RMS now, and I'm going to have a look at the rate manager. If you've never been into the rate manager, you get there by ticking this little icon here, the rate manager icon, and it brings you to this screen. It's got lots of working parts. I'm not going to show you everything today. I'll just show you the basics. A couple of recommendations. When I use this screen, I have just next to rate manager, you'll see that I'm showing category. There are a couple of options. You can build this by channel manager or by rate. I like category. I think for the purposes of what we're talking today, it's just a little bit more logical, particularly if you're not particularly experienced with this. The display I'm using is rate, which is what's putting all these numbers in the main screen over here. You can use this screen for many other things like doing your minimum night stays, for example, but today we're talking about rate, so we want to build it by rate. Now, by building it in this way, the hierarchy is putting the room type, the category, the room type on top. Then I've got all my various rate types. And then if I open up a rate type, for instance, this one down the bottom, what I've called my OTA rate, we can see it's a linked rate or a derived rate because it's got that little link symbol. If I open up OTA rates, you can see that it's showing me what I'm pushing out to the various OTAs that I'm connected to. I'll just close that up again. I'll show you a couple of other rows. So there's 4 rows here. I'm going to talk about 3 of them right now. The first one is special events. This is a row that I really recommend that people use a lot because it's a very graphic way of showing to communicate to staff the things that are coming up, the things that might make a difference. Let's have a look at a couple that we've got there. Now, the ACME conference, we had that lined up for Monday, Tuesday and Wednesday. It looks as though it's been cancelled at the last minute. That's a tragedy. We're going to have to deal with that in just a moment. And we can see the next weekend, we've got the big gala weekend coming up. So we might have to take that into account as well. And that's something that, everyone in the office is going to need to know. So we've got it nice and highlighted there. Just going to drop down now to the property occupancy row. It's not one of the most in-depth diagnostic tools in the world, but, it's something we all want to know. How is our occupancy? It's pretty relevant. If you can't see that, I'll just show you that they've got the cog, the settings cog up the top. If you click on that one there, you'll see that I've got the option to show property occupancy if you can't see it at the moment. The next thing we're talking about is the bar row, and this is what we're here to talk about today is bars. Now, what is a bar? A bar simply stands for best available rate. And I like to think of it as a price plan. It is simply the name of a price plan. And you can see that I've got my different bars going forward for each day of the weeks and months ahead. If you look at Thursday, Friday, Saturday, I've deliberately put bar 1, bar 2, bar 3. So these are my price plans working from lowest to highest. And you can see that when I have bar 1, and I'm going to talk a lot about, I'm just going to turn off that data window. I'm going to talk a lot about my budget rooms. I've set up a lot of examples with these budget rooms, and it's probably a nice, easy one because it's up at the top. You can see when I'm bar 1, I'm charging $88 for that. On bar 2, 108, and it just goes up. If we look down at say bar 3 here, the very first column, if we look down, we can see that this price plan offers a rate for each of my categories, each of my room types down here, and that changes depending on what the bar rate is. So a very quick example of how the bar system can work to very, very quickly change our rates. Let's have a look at that ACME conference now. Let's say they've just called and they've said, oh, look, we've cancelled that. And we thought, wow, we were going to be so busy. So we wanted a high bar because we wanted to optimize that demand. But now all of a sudden, look at our occupancy. It's dropped down to next to nothing, but I'm still trying to get $175 for a budget room. Not going to happen. I need to change that. It's as simple as this. I'm going to click on the first day, hold down the left mouse button as I move to the right, and I want to set a new bar. I'm going to set that. I'm going to drop it all the way down to number 2. That's one of my cheaper ones. And have a look at that. The price plan for the entire property has dropped. All my prices have dropped, and hopefully I can recover a little bit of occupancy. But what about the gala weekend? Well, that's the occupancy starting to increase already. We know it's going to be busy. We've been marketing this thing for months. We want to optimize our rate by charging more. So once again, I'm going to highlight those days. I'm going to hit set bar, and this time I'm going to go for the gouging rate, as I like to call it. I'm going to go right up to bar 7. That's going to increase the prices. So everyone booking from now on is going to be charged that new price. Anyone who has an existing reservation, of course, all bets are off. They're going to stay the same as what they were. All right, so that's how that's what the whole bar system is meant to do, and that's an example of just how quick it is to change things. So what are we up to now? So now we've got to work out all of these numbers. Now those numbers change, but how did RMS know to change it to that number? How did it know to change, Monday the 14th for our budget rooms down to 108? Well, that's what we're going to work through now. We're going to set this up from scratch. There's a couple of things we've already done. We've already got our categories in here, and I've got to assume that anyone watching this today has some exposure to RMS. I've got to assume that you've set your system up to some extent. Maybe you've just come out of training. Maybe you've been using RMS for 25 years. I'm going to assume that you've got your categories set up already, and you've probably already got some rate types set up. You might have one called standard or rack rate. You might have some extras. You might have one called company rate or government rate, whatever. You might have some of those already. Well, as I've said before, these bars, these pricing plans are set up using rate types. So I'm going to go into my little icon here about rates. You'll see the little dollar sign there. And I click on there. These are the 4 things that we're going to talk about today: types, periods, tables, and lookups. Let's start with rate types. And here are my rate types here. And I've actually got 8 bar types going from 1 to 8. People often ask me, how many bars do I need? Well, that's completely up to you. Some of the larger properties, I've seen 10, 20, even more bar rates. I've set up properties that have had 2, and we didn't call them 1, 2, 3. We called them low and high. Another one where we had low, high, and peak, I think we called it, medium or something like that, had 4. So you can call them whatever you like, and you can have as many as you like. If you're thinking of dipping your toe in the water and you want to start with bar rates, but you think, gee, I really don't know how many, I might start with 5. If you're going to do that, my recommendation is don't call them 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5. Call them something like 3, 5, 7, 9, and 15, something like that, to leave yourself plenty of room in between. If your price range never varies, like let's talk about our budget rooms, if the cheapest you charge is 88 and the most you ever charge is 100, then you probably don't need many bars, because when you're going to tweak those rates, you're only going to tweak them a couple of dollars. If, on the other hand, you've got a range of, say, $88 and the maximum you'll charge at the busiest day of the year is, say, $300, you're going to need a lot of bars, because when you're tweaking that rate, when you want to go up 1 or 2 bars, you only want to go up, I don't know, $5, $10, $15, something like that. You don't want to be having jumps of 100, because that sort of defeats the purpose of the whole thing. Let's say we wanted to create a new one. Let's say we wanted a 9th bar. Let's say we wanted bar 9. Let's click on the add button, and we don't have to do much. Now, we'll quickly talk about OTA versus direct rates. Direct rates have been used in RMS for 30 plus years, and once again, they've evolved over the years, and you can do anything with them, and they've got a lot of different options. Things like you can charge for the number of nights stayed, the night of the week. You can have discounts off, certain days. It's really, really flexible, fantastic. The problem is that since OTAs and online distribution have sort of taken over our world, OTAs need, like, let's talk about booking.com, they need to deal with hundreds of channel managers, hundreds of property management systems. So they've sort of made the connection a little bit more basic and can't deal with all of those extras that we have. So there's now 2 ways of setting up rates in RMS, or 2 structures. One's called direct, one's called OTA. Unless there's something in the direct rate, some specific little option in there that you absolutely must have, and you're never, ever, ever going to distribute your inventory on an OTA or the GDS or anything like that, then use your direct rates. For everybody else, and I'm talking about 99% of the people in the room today, just stick with your OTAs. You live a lot longer, and it really is going to simplify your world. Let's put in our bar rate. Try again. Bar rate 9. There's not much I have to do. I mean, you can fill in all these other things if you want. The only thing that I must do is tick this box here that says best available rate, and pretty much that's it. I'm going to give it that name, and I'm going to save and exit. You'll see I now have yes, I'll just tick all of those and say yes. Here we go. You'll see now that I have 9 bar rates or 9 price plans, or really all I'm talking about at the moment is the names. This on its own won't do anything. We've got to add a lot of bits to it before it'll do anything, but I've got 9 bar rates here. You'll also see here I've got a section here, a tab for derived rates. We'll have to come back to that because there's at least one thing you have to do to make this all work with derived rates. But for now, we're going to pass over that. So we've done our rate types. Now we're going to go on to rate periods. I'm just going to get out of there to show you where we get back into there. So we're back on our rates icon. This time we're going down to the next one, which is rate periods. Now this is the game changer. And anyone who's had anything to do with rates in RMS over the years will know that you needed to have lots of periods to cover every scenario through the year. And you might have a situation where we've got Easter, and it's a really high rate for say 4 days, and then it drops down to a medium rate, and then for a month it's a shoulder period, and then some other school holidays or something comes up, or 4th of July, whatever. There's a long weekend. There's always something that changes. So we needed lots and lots of periods, which in turn meant lots and lots of rate tables, and that's where all the frustration and tedium came from. But have a look at this. My top one here, I've basically got one rate type that goes from the 15th of April this year all the way through to the 30th of June 2024. So I don't have to think about rate periods again until the 1st of July 2024. I do have a sneaky little one in there as well, which is just one I've set up for a deal. And if we've got time, I'm going to show you how to set up a deal. And yes, we did need another little period, but fundamentally, I'm going to run the whole show using just one period. That brings us now down to rate. Now, traditionally, if I was setting up this same property with this number of categories and this number of periods, etc., I would have needed, if not hundreds, thousands of rate tables. You can see that I've set up the whole, and everything works perfectly. I've set up the whole property with all of those categories, etc., with just 73 rate tables. Now, in reality, it might turn out that you need, a few more than that, but it will be many, many, many less than if you were using lots and lots of periods. I have just set these out nice and neatly just to sort of try and make it more obvious. So you can see, and if you look at the weekly rate here, you can see that I've created a rate table for each of my bars for each of my categories. That's where I get the 73 from. Let's open up number 1 and have a little bit of a look at this one. We're going to edit this one. Let's start over here on the right hand side. I've got my I'm just going to point out a couple of things that you just have to know. A lot of the other stuff is superfluous, but there's a few things you have to know. The person base, I've put 2 in there because what that means is these numbers, these nightly rates, these base nightly rates under here apply for 1 or 2 people. I could have, if it was a larger, like, I don't know, a house or something that we were letting, we might say the person base is 8, 6 or 20 or whatever. But in my case, it's 2. And this $88 we're talking about is for 1 or 2 people. I'm going to go way over to the left now, and here's all my dynamic pricing stuff. Now, I'm a 5th Dan black belt RMS guru, and that took me probably 5 or 10 minutes to put together. It might take you, 6 or 11 minutes to put that together. There's a point as to why I'm saying all this. I've got my min-max nights over here. Now, you can put your min-max nights in your rate type, you can put it in your rate period, or you can put it in a rate table. I don't do any of that. I do all of my min-max nights in the control panel, but we'll talk about that probably not in this webinar, probably in another one, but that's just one thing to think about. I've got my name up here of the description of this particular rate table. The description is everything. Now, it doesn't do anything, it's just a name, but when you go searching for this rate table, it's very important to have a naming convention that you understand and that you can work for. You might want to add things to this. I've just called this budget bar 1. You might also want to put in the period. So this period is for 22, 24. And you know what? You might even want to put in the nightly rate. And this can be really, really handy when you're searching because it's something you relate to. But whatever naming convention you use it for every single rate table you ever do in the same format, whether it's name, period, dot, whatever it is, make sure it's the same every time. I'm just going to save that because I've changed it. In my tabs up here, I'm not going to go through them all in detail, but we've got our package components that we can add. I've put in a package component so that we charge a little bit extra on the first night. That's just to cover cleaning, etc. So on the first period, we want to charge this amount for the number of adults and children, We've got our deposits. You might want to have a different deposit rule for a particular rate. You might have for a cheapskate rate, maybe you want 100% deposit. For the gouging rate, maybe, you only want 25%. And then there's our additionals. Now, the only thing I'll tell you about, this is all pretty obvious. I'll tell you a couple of things. I've put in an extra daily rate charge for pets because some of the accommodation in this particular database allows pets. We can have up to 6 other additional charges for things we want to charge on a nightly basis. And that might be, anything, an extra car, maybe a boat, whatever, anything you want to charge per day. And down the bottom, you can see that we're charging for a different rate depending on how many of those additional things there are. See this tick box up here? A lot of people don't know what that is. Remember before we said that the rate that we're charging is based on 1 or 2 people. What if somebody brings 1 adult and 1 child? You'd probably want to just charge that $88. By checking this box here, including base, that's what's going to happen. 1 adult and 1 child will be the same as 2 adults. Just a little thing to remember. Housekeeping, we might have different tasks depending on what rate we're charging. Maybe we want to charge for early check-ins, late checkouts, maybe a no-show fee, blah, blah, blah. It just goes on and on. The reason I'm telling you this is that if you've got lots of rate types, you don't want to do every single one of these from scratch because it's going to take you an incredibly long time and send you bonkers. What we want to do, now we need, for example, for our budget rooms, we need a rate table for bar 9 because remember we've set up that new rate type, that new price point that we want to set up. So we need a new rate table. And as it turns out, the bar rate for 9 is very similar to one we've already got. We've got bar rate 8 here, and it's very similar to that. So what I'm going to do is check that box. I'm going to hit copy, and I'm simply going to copy the whole rate table, holus bolus, everything that I had in there. I'm going to copy across. Here it is. I've got my new bar 9. And as it turns out, really all I want to change here, I just want to put that up to $190. So I've changed my base rate. Look, I might go into additionals and I might say, yeah, well, look, for the first person, maybe I want to do that as well. And lo and behold, instead of doing all that tedium of every single field and every single thing, it's only taken me a couple of mouse clicks and a few keystrokes to change that. I'll just let you think about that for a second. Okay. Now, we've talked about all of that. Okay, so that's our rate tables. Now, hopefully that all makes sense. But once again, I want to get back to these rates here. Now, how does RMS know that for, bar 2 on Friday, the 11th of November, for my budget room, I want to charge $108? Well, you have to tell it. And how you do that is in the rate lookup, what I sometimes refer to as the rate mixer, just to try and make a little bit more sense. You can see I've got a lot of rate lookups. I've got more rate lookups than I've got rate tables, just because I've used the same rate table for different room types, etc., and it does sort of tend to blow it out a bit. If you did, find, I've made a mistake somewhere and I need to find the rate lookup that's wrong, you don't have to wade through the lot. For instance, if we said I've got a problem with one of my bar 4s, I just type into the search bar 4. A bad example because a lot of bar 4s. Let's do another way. Let's do bar 2. Yeah, lots of them too. But that's okay. And we can just go down and say, oh, yeah, well, it was this particular one here, and maybe I've got to change that. But anyway, today we want to put in a new one because maybe we're setting up our bar rates for the first time and we need to tell RMS what to charge for each room type. I sometimes think it's easier to start with the room type just because it's a bit more logical, and then you can work your way down the room types to make sure that you don't miss any. As it turns out, I've got 2 types of budget rooms, but they're both the same price. One holds 3, one holds 5, but the base rate is the same. So I'm going to tick both of those, and then I'm going to go to the rate type I'm looking for, and it's my new one. It's bar 9. So let's go through this quietly. The rate structure we're using is the OTA rate. I'm setting up my bar 9s. The first category I'm going to use is my budget rooms. I've only got one relative period, which is my big long bar rate that goes all the way through to 2024. And now I'm going to find the rate table that I want to use. And because I don't want a great big long drop down, I've just typed in the first few letters. And this is what I was talking about, the naming convention. I could have actually, if I was looking for bar 1, I would have typed in $88, for example, just to reduce that list, just to make it less tedious. This is the one I want. This is the new one we made just a few minutes ago, the bar 9. That's it. It's as hard as that. There's nothing more complicated than that. I'm just allocating what it is. Once I save and exit this, I now have to go back and do the ones for the apartment, 4-person, the pet-friendly room, blah, blah, blah. A little bit tedious, I guess, but not as long as it used to be with the traditional. And there it will be. And once you've gone through all of that, you are ready to start using bar multi. All of your rates will be in the system. What you then have to do, now I've been using this for a while, so I've got my bar set up, but if you have just started using the bar multi system, then the chances are, in fact, definitely you won't have your bars there. If you don't have a bar rate up here, if you don't have the name of one of your price points up there, then you won't show a rate. Your rates won't be pushed out to the internet, and it will be a bad thing. So you need to put a rate in. Now, it's not as though you've got to go into each individual day. And in fact, what I would probably recommend you do is something like this to start with, is to pick your most common rate, I suppose, and sort of one sort of in the middle there, let's say bar 4, and do that from today. Typically, when you're going to start this, when you're going to transition to bar multi, sort of pick a date, maybe something round number, maybe the 1st of the month, 1st of December, something like that. And don't work too far out. Don't say, 3 years time we'll do this. Well, like get it right in your head, and then plan it for the next week or so. And then I can actually in here now for say, I'll just put in a random date of a long time. When I do that, you can see that it's put a bar out, and then I can come back. And so at least now I've got a rate for everything. I'm actually going to show you an even better way in a sec, but this is not a bad way to start. Now, remember, I wanted these ones to be bar 7, so I can just quietly go back and, oh no, I didn't want that. I wanted those ones to be 2, didn't I? That's right. And I wanted this one over here to be 7. And there we go. And it's as simple as that. You just need to go in and set a bar rate for every day into the future. There's just a couple of other little things you need to do. I'm going to go back in, and I'm just hurrying a little bit now because I'm looking at the clock and it just goes so quickly. I'm going to go back into rate types now, into derived rates. Now, there is one thing you need to do if you want to use these bar rates for your online distribution, and clearly you will want to do that. You'll see I've got one here called online rate. This is a derived rate. So what this is doing is taking all my bars and saying, well, now I need it into one thing that I can put on my channel manager. I'm deriving it from bar multi, so that's a system choice that you can choose, bar multi. Give it a name, doesn't matter what you call it. Now, when I go into the setup of the internet booking engine, I can say the rate that I want you to use is the online rate. What it will do, it will, let's say somebody's inquiring about a booking that's 3 or 4 days long, whatever, it will take the bar rate for each of those days, which might be the same, might all be different, and it will amalgamate that into the rate that it's showing for the customer. You'll see that in the adjustment amount here, there is no adjustment. So I'm charging exactly the same for the internet booking engine as I would charge if somebody, rang on the phone or at the front desk. I've also got another one called the OTA, and this is the one that I'm going to use for Airbnb and booking.com, etc. For this one, same deal. I'm derived from bar rate, but I've called it OTA. And in the adjustment amount, I've actually added on 10%. So there's a plus percentage of 10% to the different rooms that I have available on those OTAs, online travel agents. That should have been in definitions, online travel agents, OTA. So that's going to add 10% just to compensate a little bit for the commission, etc. So derived rates, really, really handy. Was there one other thing? Yeah, now I'm just going to come back here to my document here, and I'm just got the one other thing that just throws folks a little bit, and we're just going to do a quick overview here. So this is what we've done so far. We've created the bars, the new rate types. Then we did our period, which has gone from lots of periods to 1. We have set up some rate tables, and then we've mixed them all together in the lookup. And there they are. We've talked about derived rates. We had to do that. Now, I just want to show you this one. So and I've got a reason that I don't want to go into the setup while I've got you online, but if you go into the security profiles, you'll see that up the top there, so anyone who's working in the front desk, for instance, because when you change over, you're going to have all of your new bar multi rates that you put in, but you'll also have all of your legacy rates that you had for several years. That's going to get terribly confusing. Now, anyone who's made a reservation into the future, yes, they're going to keep using the old rates that you had set up, but that could get a little bit confusing for office staff. So what you might like to do is go into the security profile, go into the rate type tab, and take away on the day of changeover, just change that profile so that they can't see the old legacy rates, can't see anything they don't need to see effectively. And they can just make bookings. They can still work on the bookings that had been in the system already with the legacy rates, work perfectly. Very, very simple. And when they go into, say, the rate manager, they're not going to see that confusion of all of those rates. But I just want to go back and do one other thing. Have I done all that? Yep. All right. And that's effectively as difficult as it is to set up bar multi. Now, I've spent 32 minutes talking about something that takes 3 or 4 hours, but hopefully it's one of those things. It's actually not that difficult. It's just a matter of sort of getting it into the brain. It's just got to click. And when it does click, it'll suddenly be very easy. But I want to talk about the most important thing I've left the best to last. So I hope you're still with me. I want to talk about dynamic pricing. Now, what is dynamic pricing? It's a way of automatically changing the rate, typically going up as the different brackets of occupancy are reached. So, you might say, well, I want this rate up until it's 25%. From then I want a little bit more. And after that, I want a little bit more, et cetera, et cetera. You can determine what you mean by occupancy. It can mean occupancy on the basis of the entire property, or it might be the occupancy of each individual room type, or it might be on the basis of a group of room types. Now, if you want to change it from property to category, once again, it'll be in the handout. You may know already. You just need to go into property options, property information, double click on your property and then go to options, and you'll see there's an option there to turn it from property to category or back the other way. I've used the property calculation, and it will depend on your property. If you've got a very homogenous property and you've got, 100 rooms and they're all sort of pretty much the same, equal demand, you might say, well, look, I'm more interested in the property. If you've got really different sort of accommodation, and I'm sort of thinking of my holiday park friends where they've got, cabins and outdoor accommodation, you might be more interested in doing that by the category. If you've got lots of categories that have only got 1 and 2 and maybe 3 rooms in it, the whole by category makes it a bit tricky. It looks completely up to you how you want to do it. Let's go back into rates again, into the rate tables. I just clicked the wrong button. So even the gurus get it wrong. I'm going to go into rate tables again, and I'm going to go into my example that I've been using a little bit here, and we're going to edit this one. So over in the left-hand side here, I have said that I want to use this dynamic pricing array. I've actually invented that word, but I quite like it. An array of dynamic pricing options here. And you can see that I've said so the default will be from 0 to 100. So when it gets to 20, it's going to say, I want to charge $88. But then when you can see here, I hope you can see here, that my second option is when the occupancy is between 20% and 30%, I want to stop using bar 1 and I want to use bar 2. Let's just quickly have a look at how I could change one. I'm going to add one here right now. I'm not going to, but I'm going to show you how you could. And I might say, yeah, right, well, between 20% and 30%, typically what we do is we say, I want to add, and it's, a percentage or an amount. Now, in our case, seeing as though we've gone to all the trouble of setting up bar multi, we may as well use those bar rates. So I'm not going to use that option at all. I'm going to come all the way down to the bottom. And let's actually look at an option down here. So for 20 to 30 over here, I said when the occupancy is between 20 and 30%, I want to go to budget bar 2. And I just kept building that array until I had every opportunity covered. Now, I'm going to show you that actually works. I'm going to prove to you. Now, this is where you're going to have to really concentrate, because this is going to blow your mind, but this is going to be a game changer. Let's have a look at Friday, the 11th of November, and you can see that the occupancy is 42%. Now, if I change that to bar one, you would expect that going to bar one, it's going to be $88. Remember, we've been talking about $88. But in fact, no, it's charging $168 because it's taking into account this occupancy. It's saying, I know you said bar one, but it is 42% occupancy, so we're going to charge 168. Remember before I said that, when you're setting this up the first time, that you might want to just use your most common rate. Well, what about you do this? What about you go, I want to set bar, I want to change this to bar one, because that's where I did all the rate dynamic pricing array. Oh, I did that wrong. I'm trying to talk and do things at the same time. Keep forgetting I'm a man. Set bar. So let's do this, well into the future. Let's, just pick a random date once again and hit apply. And look what happens now. It's bar one right through, but depending on what the occupancy is for the particular day, it's actually changed the rate for me automatically. So what I could do if I want to set up bar multi from start, but I don't want to go on each individual day because that'd be hard work, I can simply just use that bar one. Now you'll notice I didn't build a dynamic pricing array into any other bar rate, because what I want to be able to do, and the analogy that I use is, you might have a car that's got an automatic transmission, but it's got the little paddle things on the steering wheel where you can set the gear that you want to be in. Now I can't afford a car like that, but I've heard about these. And what you might say is, well, look, for most of the time I'm letting the automatic system run this for me, and as the rate goes up, I can go for a cruise around the Caribbean for 3 months and it's just automatically going to change the rate. Fantastic. So I can just make every day bar one in this particular case, and it's just going to do the magic for me. But if I want to override it for some situation, such as this gala weekend, well, we always knew this was going to be busy. So I don't want to wait for dynamic pricing to make the difference. I want to set this one to 7. I want to override. I want to say, I want to use the little paddles on the steering wheel to say, no, I'm in charge here. I want to charge 7. And it won't change until I change it. That was pretty exciting, wasn't it? Let me just show you what I would also do, and this is purely just cosmetics. This is just a name, so don't get too excited. But if I go into rate types here, I'm going to rename bar one. I didn't do it before because I didn't want to confuse you. I'm going to change that to auto. And now, just give that a little refresh. And we'll refresh this as well. And it didn't do it. I think I've got to get out of here and go back in. Auto, see that? So if you want to do this, you can say, if you ever see the word auto, and it's just a word, it's not magic. If you see the word auto, it means that we've set up dynamic pricing in that rate table. And don't worry, because sometimes people look at this and they say, well, gee, I was on bar one, but it's 168. What's going on? It must be broken. You can trust the science, you can trust the modeling. So people say, that's auto. Yeah, I understand what's happening now, dynamic pricing. If you had a dynamic pricing array set up in all of your bar rates, you could see that would be very confusing. So you really only need to do it on the one. I've got my auto rate here, but, and this one here, look, I'm probably happy to leave that one there. And you can just go through, maybe you've got some, peak periods where you just absolutely know you're going to be 100% full. Not only that, you're going to be turning people away. Why not go the gouging rate? Now, ladies and gentlemen, I reckon we're out of time. There's just one other quick thing that I want to show you. By the way, you should be pretty amazed by what I've shown you there. That is game changing. That is like advanced level stuff that we've just done there. The one thing I did want to show you, if you don't like using the mixer, the rate lookup thing, and some people sort of don't, it's a bit overwhelming, we do have this thing here called the wizard. And once again, you can just work your way through the wizard and it will sort of take you through it. Let's just say we wanted to do that bar 9 thing again. It's just a matter of picking the options. It talks you through, it's not too hard. Just keep hitting the next button. And then we'll say, well, this time I want to do my apartments. Yeah, we're going to do that. We're going to hit next. You can do multiple ones at once. What period do I want to use? Yeah, I want to use that. I could put in an ad hoc one. So if you wanted to use this to create a little deal that only goes for maybe a couple of weeks, you could do this for just a couple of weeks. Let's go next. This is the important thing I wanted to show you. Once you've got your sort of template rate table in place, you don't have to go through all this stuff again. You can simply use an existing rate. Sorry, not an existing. We want to create a new one based on an existing. So I'd find the one I wanted to use. Yeah, this is the one, but I'm going to give it a new name. I'm going to make a couple of micro changes. Well, there you go, folks. I hope you got something out of that. We covered quite a bit of information in 45 minutes. I didn't have too many questions at the end. Over the next couple of weeks, we're going to have another episode of this particular webinar, and we're going to get into a little bit more of the detail of some of those items that we didn't have time for and we sort of glossed over in the end. So we're going to go over all of those things. We get right into the rate tables and dynamic pricing. Going to be fantastic. So stick around for those. But I hope you enjoyed today, and we'll see you next time. Thank you.